right, everybody. I have an awesome guest for you this week. His name is Nyiam, and he is part of a group called Future Forecasters. They are a multidisciplinary group accurately forecasting crypto events with military grade remote viewing. He's been remote viewing since 2011, and his YouTube channel has been one of the top resources on the internet for remote viewing, performed live on camera with over 150 remote viewing related videos. His websites are thefeedbackloop.info and futureforecastinggroup.com. So take it away, Naeem.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So, how did you get involved in remote viewing?
I, it kind of stemmed off of just the process of kind of getting into self-discovery, learning about consciousness and reality and even some of the conspiracy theories out there at the time, like when the internet became a place where you could actually like watch videos, like when YouTube came around. Like before that, it was kind of like if you didn't see it on TV or if you didn't read a book about it, it would be kind of hard to come across information. So around 2009, my parents had cut off the cable, so we didn't have cable anymore. So the internet kind of became more of a place where it's like, okay, let me see what's on here. And read and watch things about 9/11 and different different things out there. And somewhere along the path, researching things, I started reading about meditation and out of body experiences and things that I'd never really heard of before. um and down that path came what's called the Stargate program, which is a military program that happened in the 70s and for I think 2 decades or so. And they were using ESP, or they were training soldiers on how to be like psychic spies, essentially. And that kind of piqued my interest because I thought, if the military was doing this, there might be something to it. I mean, they're not going to waste millions of dollars on nothing, right? So I thought, let me check this out. And at the time, it became declassified in 1995. So there were like manuals basically online how to do this yourself. So I thought, let me just see if this is real. Really, that's why I started looking into it, to see if it was real, not really to be good at it or anything like that. I just wanted to see, is this real? Can a person see something non-locally or perceive something at a distance? And so I started just following these guides and trying it out for myself. And you know pretty quickly it became pretty obvious to me that there's something to it. And that led me down a whole other rabbit hole of researching more about it. I bought tons of books and seeked out conversations with other people online who've been doing it for much longer than me, and just developing the skill set over the years. I eventually came in contact with someone, Dick Algeier, who's a remote viewer. He has a lot of published work, and got some mentorship from him in learning remote viewing methodology. And yeah, that kind of led to me going on YouTube and kind of just documenting a lot of my work. I would just do remote viewing sessions and record myself and just post it on YouTube. And that kind of got the ball rolling, which eventually led to where I am now, doing work, doing remote viewing professionally. Yeah.
Pro Project Stargate, didn't they do away with that in the 90s?
Yes, they wrote a paper came out essentially saying that it wasn't that useful, so they stopped using it. Um, there's no official, as that I know of, official documentation that says they're still doing remote viewing, but the rumor is that there's still some kind of remote viewing thing going on. And I find it kind of hard to believe that you would discover this kind of thing and not use it in some capacity, right? Yeah.
Do you think that they said that they did away with it just so people wouldn't look into it?
Partially, yes. I think at the time there were people in the government that when they heard about the what was happening with the remote viewing program, some of them were like, okay, this is kind of like of the devil, or this is very dark kind of thing. So there was a conflict even within the in the government as to, should we be doing this or not. And I guess at that time the prevailing power, the powers that be at the time would got it axed. You know what I mean? They decided to not, at least not publicly, um, do anything with it anymore, and kind of scrap that program. Yeah.
So walk me through your process. I mean, a lot of people hear about remote viewing and they kind of know its psychic abilities, but they don't really know how it works, start to finish. Can you walk me through your process?
Yeah, sure. Remote viewing is really a perceptual discipline, or an advanced communication skill. So it's everyone is born with an intuition. Everyone has some level of intuitive ability inherently. So the methodologies of remote viewing, there's multiple different ones. So there's different like schools of remote viewing. Essentially, what a remote viewing method does is it gives you a certain structure and steps to follow, which help manage your attention and your focus, uh, and give you moments where you can listen to your intuitive side, right? The difficulty with psychic ability or intuition in general is kind of like the signal to noise. Like what's the good information and what am I making up? What's the, what's imagination or guessing or memory, things that I already preconceptions that I might have about something. So the remote viewing methods try to reduce the chances of guessing and memory and noise, and try to boost what is called the signal, or the psychic signal. So the remote viewing method that I teach and that I use is called the HRVG method, which is from the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild, and it's slightly different from what was developed in Project Stargate. So Stargate is known for the creation of what's called CRV, or controlled remote viewing, or what's called coordinate remote viewing. Um, they all, all methodologies essentially do the same thing. Like I was saying, they create a structure for you to follow. In Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild methodology, the first thing, it starts in a beta mind state. So remote viewing, for the audience that may not know, the difference between uh, having an intuitive hunch, or having kind of like a precognition about something, and remote viewing is that remote viewing is always done intentionally. There's always like some kind of target selected beforehand. It's always like recorded, and then there's always some kind of feedback. So typically, people may have a bad feeling. Like, let's say you have a bad feeling about something, and later you find out, someone passed away, or later on you get in a car accident. That wouldn't be considered remote viewing, because that just spontaneously happened. Like, you just had a bad feeling, and then later on it was like, this happened. Whereas remote viewing is intentionally set up. So it'd be like, there's a target has been selected by somebody. The remote viewer doesn't know what the target is. So a
So
third party
how,
would,
sorry to cut
yeah,
you off, but before I forget, how is the target picked? Like how does that happen?
yeah. usually there's a project manager. So like for future forecasting group who I work for, there's people that select the target. So the viewers are kept in the dark about who the people are, because it can affect your ability to remote view. If I know the person who selected the target, I may start guessing, oh, what are their interests? And, what's the type of thing that they would set for a remote viewing target? So usually it's done blind or double blind. Double blind is when you don't even know who selected it either, right? So you don't know who selected the target and you don't know what the target is. So all remote viewing is done blind. So the remote viewers don't know what the target is or the nature of the target until the work has already been completed. So once the work is done and you already handed it in, then you get the result. Like, oh, here it was. This was what you were supposed to perceive. So that's the difference between, maybe typical psychic functioning where you may like be sitting in front of a person and giving a personal reading. It's like you see the person. In remote viewing, you don't know who it's for, you don't know what the question is, you don't know what the target is until after. So this is to create kind of like a blank slate in the conscious mind. So you have nothing to grasp onto to start guessing or have your preconceptions get in the way. So a target is selected and it's assigned what's called a target ID. So this is like a randomly generated number or letter combination. So it could be like A562-T4D7, whatever it may be. So the remote viewer is just given that. So when I go to work a project, I'm just told or sent an email or a message saying the target is A5D4T629. And so working with that target ID, you can think of that as kind of like a phone number or a hyperlink that, mentally gets you connected with this target. So the first thing we do in HRVG methodology is we close our eyes and we have a place in our visual field that we, with training, you develop where we perceive an image. So it starts in a beta state of mind, wide awake and alert. And we close our eyes and we look for 1.5 seconds for an image. And it starts off very quick and, subtle imagery. Then we move on to what's called probing for 5 sense type data, like what's the smell, what's the temperature, what's the taste, what are the sounds there, what are the textures there, and we collect a bunch of this kind of information. We put it together and we try and put it on a page and arrange it in a way that feels right. Intuitively, you're trying to say, okay, I saw some structure here and there's siren noises. And then I heard people yelling and I heard some footsteps and there's water. So we try and assemble all that onto one page. And then from there, we go into more of a alpha state. So this is where, if you're like reading a book, at first you're aware of your surroundings. But once you get kind of engulfed in the story, you kind of forget that you're flipping the pages. You get so consumed in the story that you kind of lose awareness slightly of what's around you. A similar thing happens in remote viewing. You go from being alert and aware to more of kind of like that dream, a bit of a daydream state, right? And this is where we try and get a better perception or a more clear image and impressions about what's at the target. So if we had a structure there, we say, okay, I'm going to try and look at this structure and see what's there. And then once we get an image, we collect more information like, oh, what's happening here? Is it an accident? Is this planned? Maybe it feels like a religious gathering, or maybe it feels like a political protest. So it's like following a metaphor that I like to use is like when you have a loose string on a t-shirt, if you pull that string, you'll eventually unravel the whole shirt. So it's a similar thing in remote viewing. You're starting off with these very small bits that don't the remote viewer might not know how it all fits together, but if they keep pulling the string, more and more information comes, and on a good, having a good session, you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on there. And working with a team, it becomes more powerful. You have multiple viewers all bringing their own perspective on what's happening at a target. So little moments of tapping into your intuition in between different questions that you're asking yourself. What's the smell? What's the sight? What's the temperature? And then you're giving these little moments for yourself to get information, which surfaces very subtly, and it takes time and consistency to kind of learn how to translate those feelings and those impressions into words and put them on paper. And that's really the hard part about remote viewing. I can show someone the steps, but it's going to take them time to get the hang of it, so to speak, and actually produce data that matches the target. Yeah.
It sounds like this concept is strictly intuitive, but actually you need logic too, so you don't jump to conclusions. Do you think that that's why men tend to be, I don't want to say better remote viewers, but it's definitely a very male dominated field, and women tend to be more intuitive. So why do you think that there's more men who are good at it?
um I'm not sure. I mean, there's some really good women remote viewers. I know a lot of very good women remote viewers. um Maybe the whole military type lingo and protocol surrounding it maybe ends up being more attractive to men or not as attractive for women. um, or women maybe tend to go the route of more natural psychic development.
Yeah.
Like for me, I would never consider myself as a psychic. I never did psychic work or personal readings or anything like that. Um, but there's a lot of women remote viewers who maybe had prior experience in psychic functioning and got into remote viewing and have developed furthermore. And there are a lot of women who are in the Stargate program who did some very um, profound work that helped solidify remote viewing as something that was significant. So it's a mixed bag, but yeah, I think mostly it's the military type spin to it, which maybe is not as interesting to women. Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly interested in it. So you had quite a few accurate predictions this past year. You predicted the first and the second Trump assassination attempts. You also drew the face of Ryan Routh or Ruth, I forget how you pronounce his last name. I mean, your sketch of him was almost identical. You also predicted the car that crashed into the 70 people in Germany. Do you think that was linked to the recent car crash at all for New Year's in New Orleans?
It's hard to say. I try and stick to what I produce during the remote viewing, and I try not to insert too much of my own opinion on top of it. Um, I mean, it's totally possible with just historically looking at things that have happened in the past. But when I do a remote viewing, it's like a window of opportunity to perceive something. And when it's done in advance, so like in these cases, when it's looking in the future, um, when I do it, I have no reference as to what the event is because it hasn't occurred yet, right? So I feel like the data that's produced precognitively is special in that no theories, no one's opinion, no one, it didn't happen yet. So the kind of the spin that comes with it once it happens wasn't there when the information was produced. So like now that it's happened, there's a million different theories of, you know, what people think happened or what it could have been connected to. Whereas the remote viewing data that was produced before is kind of clean from all that. It was like, well, hey, this is what I produced, not knowing what it was and before it happened. So, you know, I try and keep it like that, you know, without getting too involved with my own, you know, opinions and stuff like that.
So, do you think that future predictions are easier than past predictions for that reason, or is the opposite true?
I think future is harder. Yeah, the remote viewing isn't as reliable. Look, like the further out you try and look, often is the less, you know, reliable it becomes, and
Hmm.
that could be because maybe there's so many different possibilities of what could happen, or maybe some events aren't as solidified as others. Because there have been accurate remote viewings that go very far out. So you know, I don't doubt that it's possible to see something very far out. Um, for whatever reason, certain events stand out more in the non-local realm. You know, some events are easier to perceive, or somehow more solidified into reality than others seem to be. Yeah.
So, where do you think that you're actually accessing this information? If you're seeing something, whether it's a month away or 100 years away, whatever it is, I'm assuming you don't really know what the timeline is, but like, what are you actually accessing?
I think that, and this is just my belief, you know, I have no way to really prove this, but I think reality is kind of like a information field. And our consciousness, our awareness is a type of information field. All the possibilities, all the events, past, present, and future, exist in this greater information field. So I think when during a remote viewing, essentially, the remote viewer is kind of tuning their awareness to that frequency or that vibration that where that event is occurring. And if they're good at it, they can get a clear perception and record the information about it. Um, we like to explain it as displacing a portion of your awareness to an event or to a, you know, to a target. Um, but that's very obviously that's very hypothetical and theoretical, right? But it works. I mean, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows really exactly how the mechanics of how the information moves or where it comes from. But that's kind of my best guess. Because the subconscious, I think it comes from the subconscious mind. Like that's the best way for me to describe it. I don't think it comes from another being, or I don't really think it's channeled from an entity or anything like that. I think our subconscious has access to anything we're not conscious of, and that would be including things in the future, things in the past. And so remote viewing training and methodology helps you develop a communication pathway with your subconscious so you can on demand create these moments instead of them being spontaneous and uncontrolled.
That makes sense. Do you
Yeah.
believe that we're living in a simulation? Like you're using your subconscious to access the information in the simulation? Is that something that you believe in?
um I mean, I understand the idea of the simulation, and it kind of becomes a computery kind of idea. I mean, people
Yeah.
think of that as a computer thing. I agree in that it is a kind of simulation, probably some kind of like consciousness simulation, whatever the nature of that may be, because even in everyday life, you're not really interacting directly with a person, right? You have to perceive the information and then it's created in your mind, right? So you're really simulating other people when you interact with them or see them in your awareness. So I would agree in that sense that our experience in reality is some kind of is like a kind of simulation that we create in our awareness of whatever out there is, whether it's actually a physical place or information that's constructed into a reality in our awareness. Yeah.
Makes sense. So, what makes a good remote viewer? I mean, what makes you a good remote viewer?
Well, there's like I said, everyone has an inherent intuitive capacity. Anyone can sit in front of a piano and bang some keys out. So anyone can make noise on a piano. Some people can play a amazing, song or even compose an amazing song. Um, a certain understanding of the theory of music can make you a better musician. Some people are just naturally good at music; they don't even need to learn the theory. In my case, it was definitely learning the kind of the theory of perception and the theory of remote viewing that helped me help control it. So I wouldn't say I was significantly psychic, or I had some intuitive moments, some dreams and things like that. But really it was a lot of hard work and consistency and really pursuing improving at remote viewing, learning different techniques, getting mentorship that really brought me to the stage I'm at now. It does require a certain level of focus. Some people may not have that kind of focus capacity. Certain amount of mental stamina. Uh, a remote viewing session could be an hour. Sometimes it can go over an hour. Um, but ultimately, it does require a certain amount of um, what's the word? Like you have to take yourself seriously to the point where you're going to say, "Hey, I want to see if I can do this," right? Because most people would hear about this and say, "Okay, that's what it's just guessing or it's lucky guesses and things like that." So you have to have that curiosity. You have to have a genuine curiosity about yourself, about reality, and the limits of perception. And I mean, most of it is hard work, honestly. Some people are naturally gifted. Some people can probably just smoke me without trying. I'm sure there's some natural psychics out there that can make me look like a joke, but where I got was through practice and diligence and focus in my field, really.
How has it been having students? Because you recently started teaching remote viewing, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you had any students coming in who are like, oh, this is BS, but I kind of want to try it and see if it's real?
Most of them are open to it. I haven't had any that are like, "Is this complete BS?" Because I mean, I don't think anyone would really take the time if they really thought it wasn't real. They probably wouldn't take the time to pay and do a
Yeah.
course. But I do have a lot of students that it was their first time trying anything like this, and in a very short period, they've produced some pretty impressive work, even by my standard. Like it took me a long time to produce some of the work that I see them producing right now within the confines of the course. So they're learning something new about themselves as they're doing the course, and I can't make someone a good remote viewer. Like I can't make the session go good. All I can do is kind of show them the steps and give them multiple opportunities to do it and see what the results are. And most skeptics, they don't have the opportunity to have this happen so many times. Like I've had multiple students, so I've seen, oh wow, they did this, they did that, they produced this work. So once you kind of get into this and do it a lot and you have multiple people that you've given targets to, and you walk them through the process and you see the work they produce, it becomes very obvious that remote viewing, the skill of remote viewing, or the ability for non-local perception in humans is pretty widespread. And It's not like supernatural, it's not of the devil, it's not super crazy. It's just a part of our awareness that we don't really utilize um in the modern day, just with the intellectual dominance is more focused on language and symbols and math, and whereas the mind that remote viewing comes from is more of like the creative, the visual, the nonverbal part of our awareness, the subconscious part. So yeah, it's fascinating to see. It blows my mind whenever a student produces work where it's just like, hey, I didn't do that for you. They got to look at it just like I'm looking at it and say, well,
Right.
hey, I didn't give you any clues. I didn't tell you anything. This is what you did. Yeah.
Do you think that there's an increasing interest in remote viewing right now just because of the way the world is? People kind of wanting to know uh, how to predict the future. Do you see an increase in interest?
Yeah, I think there is an increase in interest. Even the whole AI, the idea of an I think will end up producing more interest in remote viewing. The idea of like an oracle, you know what I mean? Like I'm going to ask this thing and it's going to tell me answers.
Hmm.
Um, that idea of intelligence, an intelligence that we feel like we don't have. It feels like an AI just knows so much and it can get information so easily. I think that whole idea will open up people to the concept of human intelligence. What's the full extent of human awareness? Um, Also with just the internet in general, communication has become more advanced in over the last decade. Um, it's only a matter of time before people kind of clue in, because science really has already remote viewing psi abilities has already been established scientifically. So there's tons of evidence already that shows that we can access information at a distance. It's just kind of the skeptical mind state of even some of the scientific institutions and people in general, is what stops that idea from proliferating. You know what I mean? From people taking it as common sense. Like, yeah, of course we can do that. Right now, it's very people are very skeptical, and a lot of it I understand why people are skeptical. Of course, there are scammers and people who are fakes and all that kind of stuff, right? Um, but people who do the research, people who look into it, um, it becomes obvious through the evidence. And then with things like remote viewing, you can actually test it for yourself, and you can experience it for yourself. And that's the ultimate way to explore this. I could do session after session and draw the target and describe things, and people will still come back and say, it was a get or whatever. You know what I mean? So you can't really change anyone's mind in that way. But if you do it for yourself, you'll start to the gears will start to turn, and you'll start to change the way you see reality. Yeah.
So concerning AI, you bring it up, and it seems like, with Grok and all of these other AI systems, they're getting good at predicting the future on certain things, but there's sometimes a bias, and we don't really know how the information's being processed. Do you think that remote viewing and the human mind has the ability to be more accurate than AI, or is AI outdoing us in that way?
I think I think the human elements would be able to pick up on things that would be novel, things that aren't evident through maybe patterns, and because AI would be probably crunching the probabilities of different events that have happened in the past. Um, Remote viewing can bring about novel perceptions that are completely unexpected. Um, and this is something I've been trying to look at major news events coming up in the future for multiple years now, and my colleagues have been doing it as well. So we've seen many times things that it's just you wouldn't no one's gonna see that coming. You know what I mean? There's no logical pattern to follow as to why an event like that would happen. And that's kind of the nature of human, human existence, right? There's things that just come out of the blue that we don't necessarily have a way to latch onto before it happens. I think AI will be good at it, but I think we're still in the early days of remote viewing. Like I think the best remote viewers don't know about remote viewing yet. They're still out there. They haven't heard about it yet. So um yeah, we're in the early, I think we're still in the early developmental stages of harnessing our ability to perceive information that we otherwise wouldn't know. AI is a tool. It may become a crutch. I think it's already kind of becoming a crutch for a lot of people. I see people using it just for basic things that it's just like you could do that yourself. But I mean, people are going to do what they do. I'm really interested in human intelligence. That's the that's the thing that I'm really interested in and strengthening and exploring. So yeah.
For sure. I mean, my theory is that humanity is going to be split into two separate groups, and it's going to be the people who are becoming more organic, going back to our God-given gifts that we might have forgotten about or may have been programmed out of us. And then the other half of people who are going to, like you said, use AI as a crutch. Um, so, do you think future remote viewing predictions can prevent events from playing out? Like, how can we? I mean, I know you can never say, "Oh, this is 100% absolutely going to happen." You know, that's part of this thing is like you really don't know how things are going to play out. But is there a way that we could be accessing this so we know something's coming and we can prevent it from happening?
I think that I think things can be prevented. It's just there's so many different kinds of scenarios and situations and variables in an event that it may not always be as black and white as prevented or not. For example, let's say people foresee an event that's going to happen in a public space. Um, Maybe I could avoid that event so it wouldn't happen to me, but maybe it would still happen to other people.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's a very nuanced kind of detail, but I mean the main one of the reasons that the military was using remote viewing, one of their purposes for it was to try and see things before they happen. There's a famous remote viewing done by Joe McMoneagle where he saw a submarine being built um, in advance. One of the largest submarines being built. Before it happened, he saw it. Um, so that's definitely a possibility. I think it's just how much time and effort is going to go into developing remote viewing. How seriously are people going to take remote viewing, which is also a tricky thing to balance. You know what I mean? You don't want to just believe everything a remote viewer says and, you know, go off the deep end because remote viewers said it. So there's a whole bunch of different little nuanced parts of the puzzle that have to be kind of fleshed out, I think. But I do think it's possible with enough manpower, um, attention, enough attention and consideration in the field of remote viewing that combined with other forms of information. So like don't just go off of just what the remote viewers say, but let's say remote viewers are indicating something, other forms of intelligence gathering are indicating something, then maybe some action could be taken. But I think right now, for the most part, most people just see it as, oh, that's interesting, or that's cool, or that's entertainment. I think a lot of people just see they're fascinated or they're interested in the idea that someone could see something in advance, and they're not really thinking of the greater implications of what that means, like what you're talking about. Like, could we actually do something with it, right?
Yeah, for sure. So do you use it in your everyday life? Like if you need to find something or whatever, somebody needs something, needs your help, do you use it in your everyday life for yourself?
In different capacities, but I wouldn't consider that really remote viewing because I would know what the thing is. Like
Hmm.
if I say I'm looking for something, that then I
Hmm.
already know what it is. So it wouldn't
Hmm.
essentially be remote viewing, but
Okay.
I do use the skills that I've developed in different capacities to, whether it's find something or gain insight on different, uh, situations, avoid certain situations. Like I've avoided certain situations because of my intuition. So that's why on the larger scale, I think we could do that. Like how you were asking before, I think we could do it on a larger scale. Um, it's a skill set that anyone can learn and develop, and it has applications outside of just the remote viewing, kind of very strict remote viewing scenario. Um, it's it's difficult because it takes practice and work to develop it in the first place. Whereas people kind of think that, oh, you just become omniscient and all of a sudden you should just know
Mhm.
everything. And
Yeah.
it's not really like that. It's just like every other human skill, right? Steph Curry doesn't hit every 3-point shot. Tiger Woods doesn't sink a hole in one every single game. So it's a similar thing with remote viewing, right? You're not omniscient, but you can have really good moments. You can be really good at it. But yeah, every remote viewing is a combination of, good information, wrong information, and imagination or noise, what we call imagination and noise. So it's a balancing act, right? Um, but it definitely can be used. Those techniques that you learn in remote viewing can be used in your everyday life. It's just up to the individual how they want to apply them, right? You
Right.
can remote view blind. I mean, you can try to remote view something knowing what it is. It's just I would suggest you need to be really good at it before you try that. That's what the
Sure.
blinding is created for, to kind of to help you stay clear. Yeah.
So what would you say the biggest challenge is? You speak about the noise. That's what I would assume would be the hardest thing for me. But what is the hardest thing for you?
Yeah, once you start getting the little bits of information about a target as you're working in the session, there's the logical mind, the part, we have a part function in our awareness that wants to come to a conclusion about something and wants to create a story about whatever it is, right? You hear information and immediately it's getting spun into this, linear, it's trying to put it into some kind of order and make sense out of it. That's always happening, so you can't stop that from happening. So even the best remote viewer in the world is going to deal with this problem. So that's why it seems like such a strict protocol. Like if you look into remote viewing protocols, it's like you're doing this, you're moving very quickly. That's to occupy your conscious mind, right? So that it doesn't have time to think, oh, well, this thing is red and it's round and it's sweet, so it's an apple. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's meant to keep your conscious mind occupied so that if you hit all those spots, you go through the process. By the end of it, you'll have some good information. Um, Making that into a habit is what remote viewing training does. So I don't necessarily have to sit down and do it with the paper, right? I could stand up and go on the whiteboard behind me and do a session. And I've done, I have videos on my YouTube doing that. That's just from years of repeating this thing over and over again. So it's like, driving a car, right? Like first you're learning how to drive a car. You're like super nervous and you can't talk and you're focused on everything. Whereas once you really learn how to do it, you can talk to someone and you can play the music and you can look out the window. similar, it's a similar thing with remote viewing. Once you create that connection and you've created the habits, it's like creating a new way of thinking and perceiving, which exists, I mean, for me, exists within that portion of my remote viewing session. So once my remote viewing is done, I'm just going back to normal. I'm not necessarily trying to, tap
Hmm.
into everything. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
you got to set some boundaries.
You drive
Yeah,
yourself completely bonkers probably if you
exactly.
did
So
that.
so
Yeah.
there's that's a part of, I guess, the problem with intuition and the whole idea of being psychic. It's like you have to set some kind of boundaries if you want to stay sane. You know what I mean? If you want
Mhm.
to, and for me as a remote viewer, I got to keep some sort of intellectual honesty and credibility if I want people to take my work seriously, right? So I
Sure.
can't be inserting my opinion and just like going off on different topics. I want to keep it very clean to say, I did this blind. This is the work. Here it is. You can see the video. You can see the work. That's it. I can talk on it a little bit after, but I'm sticking with what I got. That's what I got, doing remote viewing. And it's always a challenge to stop imagination and noise. That's just there's different little steps in remote viewing that give you a moment to kind of dump those things. Like, oh, you guessing, and maybe you're guessing at something. There's a place for you to write that down and get it out of your system.
Right.
Um, so it has little steps built in for all those different moments where you're guessing or you're making things up. So it really is a really interesting and genius kind of thing that's been created in terms of remote viewing methods. Um, some of them are very strict and very regimented. There's more natural ways to do it. You could just sit back and close your eyes and wait for impressions to come in. I just find that in terms of working targets on a regular, for future forecasting group, we're doing 3, 4 targets a month, sometimes more. Doing this structured methodology is what allows me to have some reliability in my
Hmm.
work, to
Hmm.
produce it the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you're not too regimen, but you're also not too like I'm just gonna sit here cross-legged and astral project and do all that. And it seems like the team of people you work with are in the same realm. They like to work in a similar fashion that you do. How did you link up with all those people?
There was a point in learning remote viewing where there wasn't any videos of people doing remote viewing. Like it was very hard to find an actual video of someone doing remote viewing. It was all always in books, like showing a scan of a page or something. So you would see the paper and you'd say, "Oh wow, they drew this and they said that." But there was no way for me to see like what does this look like in real time. That was very difficult to come by at a certain point in the past. Along the way on YouTube, I started to find people doing actual remote viewing, like an actual video from start to finish, real time remote viewing session. One of those people was Edward Reardon, who I work with now at Future Forecasting Group. Um, Dick Algier, Daz Smith, who are also remote viewers. They did some projects in the past where they were at a whiteboard doing remote viewing on camera. Seeing those things kind of clued me in to how this looks like in real time. So it would be like reading a book about someone playing basketball, which would, I mean, you get an idea of it, but once you see
Hmm.
someone playing basketball, you go, oh, okay, that's how you play basketball. That
Hmm.
kind of inspired me and put me on the right track as to how does this look like? What's the pacing? What is it? What does a real moment of intuition look like?
Hmm.
When you watch someone do a remote viewing session, you're going to see that moment where it's like they get hit with this information. You see them try and put it into words or draw it. So it brings a reality to the process. Whereas before it's kind of just this idea of like, oh yeah, psychic, ooh. Whereas when you start to see it, it becomes real. It becomes more real. Um, so that's when I began to do videos as well. I thought, let me document and put these videos out. That led me to getting in contact with Dick Algar just through, I saw his work and I would email him. I would ask him, how do you do that? How do you do this?
Mhm.
And then he gave me mentorship on remote viewing over many years. And I would send him work over the years. I would say, hey, look, I tried to look at next month, or I did this target, or I did that target, and I would send him my results. And somewhere along the way, he had created Future Forecasting Group, and they were doing it for a few years already at the time. And along the way, he said, I really like the work you're doing. You've been consistently doing this, and that led to my opportunity to work with Dick and Daz and Edward. So the same guys I was watching on YouTube for years now, I work with them. So yeah, it's just the way things played out. The universe just has a way of bringing things together. So it was really completely not something that I was ever expecting. I was just doing remote viewing because it was very interesting to me.
Right.
But yeah, now I'm doing it pretty much full time now.
That's awesome. Good for you. That's so great. So you guys kind of do this basically for the public, for people who want to pay a membership to see, sort of have like a bird's eye view into what you guys do. But have you and your team, have you ever been approached by like the police or intelligence of any sort for you to use your work for them?
I have not. There's some problems with that idea. For example, my colleague Des Smith, he's a remote viewer. He's been doing it for many years. Um, Police don't really want, in most cases, police don't really want psychic information. They just want to know the answer. So,
Hmm.
like in terms of like a missing person,
Hmm.
they don't want to know about what you think about them and their emotions and what happened. They just want to know like a GPS coordinate. Like tell us where the
Right.
person is. Um, Also, giving information to the police. So let's say there was a missing person and
Hmm.
I go on my own will and try and perceive something about them, and I go to the police and I say, "Hey, here's what happened to them. Here they are." I could easily become a suspect, right? So, and that's happened to my colleague Dad Smith, like produce
Wow.
information for the police and then ends up on a suspect list.
Wow. No
So,
thanks.
yeah, so I mean, it does happen. There are police that employ intuitives to help cases.
Yeah.
There's a documentary you can find online about Rose Kopp. She was a remote viewer for Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild, and she produced information that helped put a serial killer on death row. So like there are applications. Remote viewers are used in those kind of scenarios. It's just it's a very, I guess, private sector kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like you would have to be approached. It would have to be all worked out. It's
Hmm.
not a good idea to kind of just go on your own and start saying, "Oh, I'm going to tell everyone about this missing person or what happened," to this.
Hmm.
Especially if it's an ongoing investigation, you could, if you're good, you can get yourself into some trouble.
Yeah, I could see that. That's why I asked the question. I figured you would answer that way, but I had to know. Okay, so your subscribers that you have on your platform, they are like just everyday people who are kind of looking to see. I mean, there's obviously an interest in what remote viewing is, but is it that they're trying to see what's going to happen over the coming months and years, and they're trying to plan accordingly based off of your analysis?
Yeah, we do a number of different things. So we do the future stuff, of course. So we every month we try and see the major events that are coming over the horizon. But that's just one, that's something that we do in the final week of the month. We also do a number of projects, which would be like, historical things. We might look
Mhm.
at, something in the past, some event in the past, pyramids, uh, people of interest. So like we've done Elon Musk, we've done,
Can you
Nikola
talk about
Tesla.
that?
Yeah, sure. I can expand on that a bit.
Okay. Yeah.
So we do people of interest, we do historical events, we do some current events. We do a bunch of financial things, you know what I mean? Not financial advice, but we'll look at different cryptocurrencies or silver, gold, what's the performance gonna be like? What's the sentiment? So we offer a whole bunch of different things, and some people are very interested in the world events part, because it's future, so a lot of people are very interested in that. But we do have a large following that is very interested in the financial stuff. You know what I mean? They want to see what kind of insights that we give on the financial things. So really it's, and then we do like woo woo stuff, stuff that's just like, every once in a while we'll do the what's the UFO picture, or
Hmm.
what's the Area 51 thing, or we those are always thrown in there. But we're, the viewers are always blind. So that's what makes it, I mean, for me, I can keep a level of intellectual honesty about it. I can't lie to you about whatever the subject is, because I don't know what the target is, right? I'm just doing my remote viewing. So um some of it can come off as, some people think of it as like fear mongering. Like if we look into the future and we see something bad happening, some people say, oh, you guys are pushing fear. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I didn't know what it was. You know what I mean? I'm just
Yeah.
working the target. So I'm just being as honest as I can within my remote viewing. Maybe I was wrong. You know what I mean? I'm not always right as a remote viewer. So I think that's why we have it on a private platform for the most part. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that
It's the
makes
people who are willing to take it in, who can handle this kind of information. We give it to them first and foremost. Yeah.
that makes total sense. So, can you talk about, I know, like I said, you were accurate on a bunch of things in 2024. Is there any general picture that you can give us for what you see in 2025? Like anything that has stood out to you that you and your team have kind of said, oh, something like this might happen or something like that might happen? Is there anything that stands out to you that you could generally discuss?
Yeah, sure. We did a project on the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency. We did a project on that recently, looking out, I think, till 2028 or something, a couple years out, like looking like
Mhm.
what's going to unfold, what does this bring? And I mean, there was some pretty concerning things in there, some financial changes, digital infrastructure,
Yeah.
even a little bit of the transhuman kind of theme entering into that.
Hmm.
So like, major shifts in societal norms, as in terms of what we've known in the past, people being replaced, probably a lot more automation coming into the picture, the digital currencies taking more of a center stage. um and in my opinion, a lot of it was felt negative to me. You know what I mean? It wasn't exactly all happy.
Hmm.
um but that's what we got. You know what I mean? That's what we got looking into that subject. um that can help some people, I guess, if they know what's coming, or they want to prepare or change the way they I think ultimately it gives us choice. You know what I mean? If we can give information, whether it's good or bad, it gives people different opinions and different takes on what may be happening in the future, which some people find valuable, or we wouldn't our platform wouldn't exist if some people didn't find it valuable. We did have a lot of war, like back in 2022, 2023. We looked forward to where we are now, and we had a lot of war things back then, and there was no war really happening back then. But now we have the Ukraine thing, we have the Russia thing, we
Hmm.
have the Israel Palestine thing happening.
Hmm.
So like I said, I don't want to make it sound like it's gonna happen, or it's 100%, but it's
For
like,
sure.
yeah, we do have a pretty good track record in terms of some of the things we produce. So yeah, it's just something to keep in mind, going into the future, especially the big financial reform and change. Definitely something that I think is coming soon.
I do too. I think it's coming within the next year or two. That's just a wild guess. But is there anything else that you want to share with us? I know you had some things that you wanted to maybe share through a PowerPoint or a presentation that you might have.
Yeah, I got a couple slides here to just show some of the different images and that I produced,
Yeah,
looking at some of the news events.
awesome.
These are just like little snippets, and these are just ones that I produce. Like every month, me and my colleagues, so it would be myself, Daz Smith, Edward Reardon, Dick Algire. We're all going to produce a number of perceptions that we see coming in the near future. Um, and they have some amazing ones. You know what I mean? They have amazing foresights. So these are just some of the ones that I produced last year, and some of these maybe 2023 and 2024. Um, so one was the death of Alexei Navalny. Um, this was a pretty big story when it happened. He was poisoned. But I had doing our world events, I said, okay, next month there's going to be a pretty significant leader with like a president type energy. There's going to be a funeral. It's going to be like an open casket, kind of like this. And
Wow.
I tried to draw him there. It's going to be a big, a famous big story that's going to happen. And the following month, he was poisoned, and that's the image there, the image that I drew, and then the image of the funeral there.
Wow.
Um, this one was one of those weird stories where it's just like, who's gonna guess that one? This was
Wow.
I think it was, yeah, Justin Moan beheaded his father and made a YouTube video. He showed the head in a YouTube video. Um,
Whoa.
the month prior, I said there's going to be a beheading story.
Holy
Um,
crap.
it's going to be gruesome. It's going to be, you know,
Wow.
he's going to have a militant kind of mercenary spin to it. And he was basically saying in the video, we need to take over the government. We need to overthrow the government.
Wow.
Um, so that was kind of gruesome one. And that's the thing. Sometimes with the remote viewing, anything can happen, right? You got to be open to perceiving some things that aren't always so nice.
Yeah.
Um, this was one I did. I saw people fighting in the parliament. I said there's going to be an upcoming major news event where there's going to be a brawl. Chaos is going to break out in the government building, like in the parliament. And I saw this guy rushing to the front where the speaker of the house would be, kind of lunging at him. And
Wow.
then about a month and a half later, this is the screenshot that was
Oh
shown
my gosh.
all
It's
over the
so
news. I mean, and that's what I
stacked.
drew. So,
That's
I
insane.
mean, I guess you could argue that this kind of thing, it does happen every once in a while, but
Hmm.
I said it was coming soon, and this is literally the image
Wow.
that was shown. So, I mean, people can make up their own minds on that.
Wow.
Um, Jordan Neely was a man that was choked on the subway. It was a pretty
Yeah.
big story at the
Oh,
time. So the month prior to that, I said there's going to be a significant chokehold, strangulation from behind murder story that's going to be in the news. And the next month, uh, Daniel Penny, I think was his name, Daniel Penny, and the Jordan Neely incident happened on the New York subway. So I mean, that doesn't make news very often. Someone getting choked up, and that image was very viral. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what I mean by certain things. Maybe it has to do with human attention, or I can't really explain exactly why, but certain things come up in our major news. But this was a pretty
big
big story,
story.
and it's kind
Yeah.
of still a big story just recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
We did a this one wasn't a major news event. This was like an actual target that we worked. So this was blind. So I didn't know who set the target. I didn't know what the target was. Could have been anything, anyone. You know, the target ended up being who's going to be the president, who's going to win the 2024 presidential election. And this is a screenshot from that video. We did it in March, so way early in the year. We did that. There were still multiple candidates at this point.
Hmm.
Um, and I drew this image, and once we got the feedback saying, okay, it's who's going to be the president, I pulled up this image of Trump, and I said, okay, this is my guy. Obviously,
Hmm.
this is Trump's going to win the presidential election,
Yeah.
and then attached there is the results there. So certain things are perceivable in the future, and maybe one of the metaphors I've that I like to use was one from a remote viewer, Lynn Buchanan, who talks about a frog on the pond of time, where it's like if a frog is on a pond and he's standing on a rock, and there's maybe a bug on a rock in front of him, when he jumps to go to that rock, he may scare that fly away, right? So I think there's certain events in the future that are very similar. It's like they're there, we perceive them, but they may not happen, or maybe we get there and it's still there. So just kind of more of the mystery of time and how reality works. Kind of interesting things can happen in remote viewing.
Absolutely.
This was the Trump assassination, the first Trump assassination attempt. So we did this in, I think, April. We published this. We were looking forward for the next 3 or 4 months, the next quarter of the year. And so I saw someone looking down the sight of a rifle. I said, this is going to be a assassin type event. Uh, National security is going to get triggered. It's a political, it happens mid speech. I saw a man at a podium, charismatically speaking to a crowd, clapping, cheering. Everything's on the up and up, it felt like to me. And then I see a person up on the left,
Mm.
on an elevated area, um, taking aim there. And
Wow.
you could see the little projectile there, which was a kind of like a famous picture that
Mhm.
that came out after that event happened. Um, Not exactly something that happens very often. I mean, I can't remember the last time there was a major assassin event on a politician.
I think
Um,
Reagan was the last one.
yeah, yeah, like in front of a
Wow.
crowd type thing on national TV. So this was obviously a huge story at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and then there was the second assassination attempt, Ryan Ruth.
Yeah.
Um, the month prior, I published this drawing, and you could see me describing this on my YouTube channel. I'll post some of this information and summarize it on my YouTube channel after. I said there's going to be gunshots, and he was fired at. Ryan Ruth was fired at by Secret Service. I said there's a vehicle involved. There's going to be a manhunt involved. They're going to, kind of shut down the area and try and capture this guy. And it's an assassin shooter type scenario. And one of the criticisms I got on this one was that I didn't draw the person, like, I didn't draw his face. So I said, okay, the next time I get an assassin event, I'm going to look at the person's face. So
Hmm.
for this one, that's what I did. I
I
said,
mean, and
okay,
it's almost exact.
yeah, and that's another one of the challenges of being a remote viewer. I mean, you're going to perceive something, and then you have to try and draw it accurately from
Yeah.
memory, right? I maybe saw
Yeah.
this fleeting image for a second and a half, and then I try and reproduce it. So and then yeah, the news event came to pass
Wow.
shortly after.
So fascinating.
This was September, I think, or October, but a couple months before the election, again, I'm seeing Trump winning. I mean, kind of like low hanging fruit, I guess. Some people could say, "Oh yeah, well, of course Trump's going to win," but I mean, a lot of people thought Kamala was going to win
A lot of people did.
at
Yeah.
that time. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I was just doing my remote viewing thing. I'm not really. I don't sit around thinking about politics all the time. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
a you know, I'm not American. I'm in Canada, so
Yeah.
really the American election isn't really pervasive in my mind like that. I'm not sitting around thinking so much about whether Trump's going to win or not.
Right.
But I did my session and I'm seeing Trump on stage. I'm getting the sense of congratulations, duty of office, elected, selected, all that kind of thing. And then, you know, he won the following months. He ended up winning. Now, this one was really interesting. We did a target on Elon Musk, and this was in
Mm.
2023. This was like a couple years back. And at the time, Elon Musk wasn't really politically affiliated with Trump. I think he was actually
Right.
more left leaning at that time.
Right.
Um, but we did a session on Elon Musk, and you know, I drew him. I drew him a few times. I said he's an inventor, he's a businessman, he's wealthy. Described a bunch of things about him, and then I saw the Capitol, and I said, "This guy is." You know, I didn't know who it was. I was blind to
Mm-hmm.
the target. I said, "Whoever this guy is, it's like he's gonna be in the Capitol or he's gonna somehow be associated with the president." And I had the sense of New World Order, you know, related with that somehow.
Wow.
And that was back in 2023. So we produced this stuff and we just put it on record, right? We published it to our subscribers. At the time, I'm just saying, hey, this is what I got. You know, I just put it out there. But now we know, you know, more recent developments is now Elon Musk and Trump are very closely associated, and he's been given position in you know, government departments. So just, you know, one of those little interesting tidbits of how remote viewing information can become very real. You know, at the time you produce it, precognitively, it's like, okay, no one knows what this means, but it can come to fruition down the road. So a lot of interesting things like that happen in our data. So we have a really big archive of remote viewing data, and every once in a while, it's like we look back and go, oh, there it was. You know, it appeared in our
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And then more recently, in September, looking for major news events, I saw drones, and I said, "There's going to be some worldwide footage drone story that's going to come out. People, you know, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a significant, major story." And my sense was that it's going to be a major revelation is going to come from this enemy territory spycraft. It had a military recon surveillance theme to me. That's my interpretation of it. And then in November and December, of course, as we all know now, it's pretty much one of the most pervasive stories in a long time is this
Yeah.
drone thing. You know, these drones all over, you know, in different places, and everyone's wondering what it's about. Um, yeah, I had that before it happened. So
Wow.
just a couple different little peaks in
Just a,
there of
just a couple
how
of
the
different pieces. Nothing,
yeah.
nothing major. Just all the news that you're knocking out of the park.
Yeah, it's I mean it's super interesting to do because it takes a certain amount of I mean you got to be humble about it because you know you're not always right. So we
Sure.
publish this information. I know every story is not going to be right. You know, I know that, but there are certain ones that stand out where it's like, okay, I think this is really going to happen because sometimes it's something that I would never think of in my wildest dreams. It's something I would never, you know, it's not like, oh, a volcano is going to explode or there's going to be an earthquake. You know, sometimes those happen, but
Hmm.
a guy getting beheaded or, you know,
Hmm.
drone, it's like, why would the logical mind says, why would a drone be in the news? Why would that be a major story, right? You're always battling the logical part of you. So that's where the training comes in. It's just, hey, I'm putting this on the record and we'll see what happens. And interesting things happen.
Well, I guess that's the benefit of working with a team too, right? Because you all get to do your own breakdown and then you come together and you say, this is what I found. What did you find? And, if the however many of you there are, what is it, seven or eight of you, six, seven, eight?
There's four, usually four or five of us do
Four or
the
five of you.
the
So
thing.
then if
Yeah.
you're all getting the same thing, then it's kind of like, okay, there's something here. I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of,
That's another thing that's interesting. We don't see each other's work prior. So we get on the video call and we all go through our work, and yeah, sometimes we have exactly the same thing, or we're describing the same event. So
Mhm.
that's kind of shows the nature of remote viewing. It's like, what are the chances that four different guys in separate parts of the world all come onto the call and then we're describing a similar thing, right? So, and that's something that I see in my students. I'll give four or five students a target and they all come back describing, of course the target was set that time, but just to see them all pulling on the same strings of data, to me, it further solidifies that remote viewing ability. You know what I mean? It's not random guessing. It's not just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and hope something sticks. It's like, no, there's really something going on here. Yeah, it blows my mind, honestly. Every time we go on a call and something like that happens, it's pretty mind blowing.
Well, it's so exciting that you get to do this as a living now. I mean, that's so awesome. So let everybody know where they can find you again, because I have a feeling a lot of our subscribers are going to be interested in following your work.
Yeah, so the remote viewing work that I do with Future Forecasting Group is at futureforecastinggroup.com. Um, the remote viewing lessons that I teach are futureforecasters.com if people are interested in learning remote viewing. And then my personal website is thefeedbackloop.info. And I just have some educational remote viewing content. There's some practice targets if people want to try remote viewing, videos of doing remote viewing. And then my YouTube channel is Nyiam TV, Nyiam TV, and I got a whole bunch of different remote viewing videos related stuff on there. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I mean X now, at Nyiam NYIAM_.
That's how I found you, and I think everything you're doing is just it's mind blowing, and I look forward to following your work. So. Um, we'll stay in touch. I'm sure that other people on Iconic are going to be interested in interviewing you after this because it's mind blowing what you do.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
No problem.